Hi, this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And this is the Emotion Roadmap. Oh, I'm getting some feedback here. Okay. This one? That's what I need. Thank you. Okay, I'm back on the air. This is Chuck Wolf. You're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And in being here, this is, I think, the really last time. I thought a couple other times ago that maybe I was going to be here just in October, but it's going to be next month is going to be the first time I'm actually going to be in the new studio. So this is really my last time in the studio. So I want to thank everybody who's listened all these years that have been on the air. This is my going on my 13th year coming up next month. And it's been great being at the studio. And I have fond memories of the studio. And I want to thank everybody who's managed to tune in on somewhat of a regular basis. And all those listeners who like to call in and talk and who just like to listen. Thanks so much for your time. And I hope you found it really something that has been meaningful in your life. That's why I do the show. So one of the things I wanted to start with today on the Emotion Roadmap, take the wheel and control how you feel, is just to say thank you to all the people who have served in any meaningful way for us. Veterans in particular, since it's Veterans Day coming up. But thank all of you who serve in any meaningful way. We really appreciate it, all of the rest of us who are served by you. So that's one thing I wanted to share today, and as I think about the memories associated with being here. I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the topics we've covered in the past, and I hope that you found them interesting. There are a number of things that I've had the chance and privilege to learn over the years with people that are really, really smart in fields that sort of connect to the world that I'm in and emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I've learned very recently is some new information to me anyway about women in leadership. And I'll share a little bit about that today. I also want to say that the show is always really enjoyable when we get callers. And if you have something you want to call about, and there's a variety of topics, as you know, the show's about taking the wheel and controlling how you feel. So if you've got something in mind that you feel like you want to ask about, that happens to be a challenge in your life, that's something that you're unsure about how to proceed, it's been the experience of the show, and all of you who have listened, and those who you might be new to listening today, the show is about helping people understand the impact of the emotions we experience, how those emotions impact us, and particularly how they're impacting us regarding any uncertain, challenging, confusing situations that we might be facing in any aspect of life, really. Whether it's at work or at home, it really doesn't matter. It's really about learning life skills when you're learning about emotion management, understanding emotions, using emotions, recognizing emotions, being able to talk about and label emotions. So all that's really important, and that's the show's trying to help people who call in, specifically with what you're calling about, through this emotion roadmap. And then also for everybody who's listening, to learn more about how what they just heard might impact their own lives. So that's what the show's about. If you had something you wanted to call in about, that you're clear about, and you want to talk to me, last time in this building, the University of Bridgeport building here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the number is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. And, some of the things that you may want to talk about, if it's not problem related or challenge related, is something to do with veterans. Because, again, I like to think that we think of veterans all the time, and we're thankful all the time for them putting themselves at risk in order to maintain and help us to keep our freedoms. So as you think about all that, and you think about those people that have served, and some who have really run into some very challenging situations as a result of that, both in the service and then sometimes afterwards. So you want to be thankful and helpful and respectful of all those people that have done that, who have had that experience. And again, service is, we often think about our military veterans, but I think there's so many people, whether it's first-line responders or people in healthcare, there's so many people that have given us their service that I just want to say thank you to everybody with a special focus on veterans, because that's really something that I've never been part of, so I've never taken part, but my dad was in World War II and he was a veteran, and my uncle who just passed away was a veteran, and really all my uncles were veterans. And so I do appreciate, from a distance, not having been there, but do appreciate that there are so many things that happen in the service, good and bad, that you carry forward. And it isn't just the burden of the time you served, it's also what you carry with you as a result of serving. And again, I can be more thankful. Just want to say thanks so much for helping to protect everyone, really. Okay, as far as women in leadership, if you've got something you want to say about women in leadership, or you have some thoughts about what you've seen as best practices, I will share a few things with you. Here's one. So one of the research articles that I read, I think I probably read about 10 different articles and getting ready for learning more about this topic. And the articles, well, many of them were from Harvard Business Review. And one of them is really interesting about the fact that women, when there's a certain percentage, by the way, when women with a certain percentage of support by other women are in top management teams, they have an influence on profitability. At least the research shows somewhere between 5% and 20% more profitability. They also benefit in ways like, better retention. It's also interesting, I read that there's less mergers and acquisitions and more development and research inside the firm. It's just an interesting kind of sidebar, but lots of different things about women in leadership. And those benefits, interestingly enough, and this is something, again, I didn't know, show up in countries, think about it, in countries and companies or organizations where women are seen as normal when they get into senior roles. It's what they call normative, or just simply normal. It's well accepted. In places where it's done because of regulatory requirements, perhaps from the government, perhaps from the standards inside their industry, but wherever it's coming from, it's somebody on the outside saying you have to do this. So it's regulatory compliance-based. They don't always see those same benefits, even though they may have women in top management teams. And the implication is that if you're really not buying it and you're just doing it to meet a quota, so you get a bonus or of some kind, you don't reap the benefits because you're not really valuing it. So that's really interesting, I thought. So anyway, there's a lot of different things that I learned. I'll share a few more of them. But if you have any thoughts about women in leadership and you've had some experiences and you want to share those, that'd be great. So if you want to talk about veterans, people that you know and you want to be thankful for publicly, if you want to talk about your experience as a veteran, and you just want to call and share anything on the show, that's welcome. If you want to talk about a situation that you're facing that you're uncertain about, that I might be able to use the emotion roadmap with you to help you out, if you'd like that kind of help and you're comfortable coming on air and talking about it, know that everybody who's listening is going to learn something. So I encourage you to do so. 203-336-9756. Well, one of the things that I also wanted to talk about was simply something in politics. And there was a bipartisan infrastructure bill passed. And a lot of people cheered when it passed. Some people are angry for different reasons about it passing. But I happen to work with a group, and I've mentioned this on the air before, called No Labels. And No Labels, the idea of No Labels as a title, as a brand, is that they're nonpartisan. And they encourage bipartisanship, and they work really hard to help bring legislators together. And through a lot of what they did, the leaders of No Labels, and I encourage you to look it up if you don't know anything about it, nolabels.org. What they did is they were able to bring together Republicans and Democrats to vote on something that really does seem, for the most part, to benefit the country. I've seen some criticisms of the bill. Mostly what I've seen is great, but there are some, I suppose, legitimate criticisms. But I just think it's wonderful that we got something good. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's good, and it's good for the country. Now you have to manage it. We have to see that people manage it, and money doesn't get given in places where it shouldn't, but it really does go for infrastructure. That would be great. And that's really wonderful. And I just wanted to say something about the organization, that they really worked hard across the aisle. They brought people together. They actually encouraged and brought people together to meetings, bicameral sessions, which haven't really happened very much over the years. And they brought together senators from both parties with Problem Solver Caucus, which members of Republican and Democratic parties that are part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. And they began talking about these ideas for this legislation, and they finally brought it across the finish line. So I'm very excited about that. If you want to talk about that in a good way, that you're happy to see something happen that's positive for the country, then you're also welcome to call as well, 203-336-9756. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the things that are going on as far as the pandemic, because I think that's something also that's causing people to have some real fears and concerns and doubts. And, and if I'm looking to try to help people be more emotionally balanced, I'd have to say that the balance is skewed right now around Corona, because there's so many people so emotionally moved by what's happening, and easily understandable. I mean, there's so many deaths and people with long-term symptoms from the disease or illness. It's really something that we've tried as hard as we can to feel like, hey, it's past and we can move on. And then every once in a while, it feels like it has sort of started to die down, and it seems, it's still killing some people. So I don't know if it's ever normal, but I guess disease does that, and it's not a crisis in the same way as it was. And then it spikes again. So not really sure where we are with it. And living with uncertainty is incredibly emotionally uncomfortable. So I got to believe it. That's why I want to talk a little bit about it. I don't know how you're feeling about it. But there's so many questions now about people, whether you wear a mask or not wear a mask. It's like a game where if a politician says today that you have to wear a mask in these other places, and then you see them out and you catch them and you got a video of them or a picture with them without a mask, that's news somehow these days. And I think they do it because, I don't know, that I guess if you think everybody's vaccinated around you and you're all vaccinated and you've got your boosters and whatever, when does life become at all close to normal, where you do just go out and hang out and you don't have to wear a mask? So it's really hard to know what even normal is. And that's why I think, again, it's an emotional issue for a lot of us right now. So how are you dealing with that? Again, it'd be interesting to get different people's perspectives of what they think about how their feelings are impacting what's going on relative to COVID. What are your thoughts? A pleasant thought, if you haven't already heard it, is that there are two companies, Merck and Pfizer, and with some partners, I guess, who have developed pills to treat COVID. And that's got to be uplifting, I think, if you haven't heard that. They're not, I guess, approved yet. There's a process you have to get through, but the data and the results that they're reporting are all really positive, that once you might find yourself with COVID, that these pills, which apparently are a lot less expensive than monoclonal antibodies, but I guess they're still really expensive. I don't know. I have no idea how much it costs. But anyway, I do know that they've got some pills they're excited about for keeping people out of hospitals and keeping people from dying. So that's uplifting around the virus, I guess. So what are your thoughts about it? Again, 203-336-9756. Once more, if you want to call, 203 336 9756. Well, it looks like the phones are working. It looked like there might have been a try before. You want to try again? Okay, thanks. Anyway, so if I'm thinking about the title of the show, the history of the show, kind of how it started, I'll kind of give you a little bit of perspective, since this is a sort of a day I want to remember in a way that is memorable, because it was, let me think, it's 2021 now, and it was around 2009 that I first came to the studio, and that's when the show started sometime that year, and it was it was amazing. If you've ever seen the studio, of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, yes, you actually know what sort of have a sense at least of what's behind me, but the studio is an old-time studio, it feels like. Lots of stickers everywhere, albums, CDs everywhere, well organized by our librarian, Dell, who's been fantastic. And now it's all in transition. It's all going out of here to our new studios, which I have seen, and they're beautiful in downtown Bridgeport. So if you've got something, a memory of one of the shows from the past that you'd like to share, that'd be great. I'll tell you a little bit about the beginnings of the show. So the show got started in this way. I was teaching. My full-time job is I'm a leadership coach, and I could do consulting for organizations around change and around performance and teams, things like that. And I have a specialty in emotional intelligence, and those of you who listen to the show know that. But one of the things that I also do on occasion is I've taught courses at universities and colleges. And I was teaching at the University of Hartford in their psychology program for graduates. And I was teaching a course called Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. And in that course, part of what I do is I teach people about this emotion roadmap. And again, if you happen to be listening and you're new, I'll spend a moment here talking about what that is. In the late 1990s, I was working with a fellow named Peter Salovey, who's president of Yale University, Jack Mayer, a University of New Hampshire professor of psychology, who were the two founders of the initial theory of emotional intelligence abilities. Jack Mayer, Peter Salovey wrote a paper. They consider this seminal paper that was about emotional intelligence. It was the first time, and I think it's been introduced once before by somebody else, but never stayed around. It was just in an article somewhere published. But here, they wrote about emotional intelligence in a way that got captured when Dan Goleman wrote about their work. Dan Goleman is really well known today as like the sort of the father of emotional intelligence in terms of its publications. He is the person probably who's written the most about it, and who wrote that best-selling book about emotional intelligence, Why It Might Be Better Than IQ, back in 1995. So in 1995, Dan got people excited about emotional intelligence. In 1990, Peter and Jack wrote about it and introduced it to the world, the idea with some research they had done on a model that they called an ability-based model. And I'll take a minute and talk about that. An ability-based model of emotional intelligence is different than a lot of the assessments you might take that ask you whether you think you're emotionally intelligent. They may ask you a question like, are you self-aware of how you feel? All the time, some of the time, don't know, none of the time. And you have to choose between some of those kind of tests. But this is about like taking a math test, having an algebra equation that you have to solve, a calculus equation, a trig problem, a geometry problem. Those test those kinds of abilities. They don't ask you if you think you're good at geometry. They ask you to demonstrate it. And Jack and Peter's model were about abilities, and so they actually created a test where you have to pick the right answer in order to get a high score on what they consider to be these 4 branches of emotional intelligence. And the 4 branches are the ability to identify how you're feeling, the ability to use emotions. Think about what that actually says for a minute. Most people just kind of gloss over that because it doesn't even make sense. What do you mean use emotions? How do you do that? Well, use emotions is this idea that when you are doing something that's important, where you have a goal or an objective you want to achieve, what do you want to feel? What's the best feeling for what you're trying to get done? Have you ever asked that question? I think most people haven't. And so by asking that question, you might discover that what you're feeling currently is not helpful to what you're trying to get done. For instance, if you're trying to write an inspirational speech and every time you start to write something, you think about how uninspired you're feeling because of something that just happened. You know, you're thinking about somebody who was very critical of you and you think unfairly. And every time you try to write something positive, it just doesn't feel real to you because you got this other feeling that's saying you're not worthy. Somebody criticized you, or you hate them and you want to defend yourself. How do you do that? How does that actually happen? Well, the use of emotions is this idea of at least thinking about what you're feeling and recognizing that what you're feeling may or may not be helpful. And if it's not helpful, take another step and ask yourself, well, what feeling would be helpful? And the reason I think feelings are so important is that I think feelings are the reasons we do things. I think feelings drive what we say to ourselves, our self-talk. And I think that self-talk plus our feelings drives our behaviors. You ever wonder why you do strange behaviors over and over and over again? Whether it's overeating, over drinking, overworking, doesn't have to be over. It can be underperforming, being lazy, knowing you're supposed to get something done, but just deciding to, play a video game. Whatever. There's things that we do that we know when we do them, they're not right. They're not the right thing to do. And yet we still do them. So what's that about? Well, that's not about anything rational, I can tell you that. That's not about thinking and talking, except the thinking and talking we're doing is driven by our feelings. What's the feelings? Insecurity, boredom, disappointment, depression. There's a lot of feelings that we might have that might be helpful for certain things. I mean, actually, being anxious when you've got to perform, if it's not too anxious, is helpful. It keeps you focused. Being intense and focused is somewhat different than saying I'm in the moment. It's just happening on its own. Well, I mean, that's at some level different, but most of us aren't in that moment most of the time. So when we're trying to perform well, then having a little bit of attention and focus, I think, is really a good thing. That's my point, is that you can actually stop and ask yourself, hey, based on what I'm trying to do, what makes sense is what I want to feel. And how do I do that? And by the way, it sounds simple when I talk about it like this, but it isn't easy to do. And that's why I've been doing the show for 13 years. And I'm sure some of you have gotten it, but not everybody. Again, if you'd like to call, the number's 203-336-9756. I want to once more thank the people out there who are veterans, who have done so much for so many of us, in the sense that they were willing to put themselves at risk to help protect all of us and our freedoms. So thank you so much to all those who are veterans, those of you who know veterans. Let them know you appreciate them if you feel that sincerely, and I think most of us do. Okay, so you want to talk about veterans, or veterans want to call on? Please do. 203-336-9756. I had said I'd also talk about women in leadership roles, and I'm going to share another idea with you about that. Something else that I learned that I thought was pretty interesting to me. There's something in the world called a double bind. It's sort of like heads, you win, tails, I lose. Heads, you win, tails, I lose. There's no way to win. That's what a double bind is. Double standard, sometimes that's different. That's where, I'm expected to do more because you think differently about me for some reason. I'm a member of a different group. I got put here just because there was a quota for whoever I am, my gender, my race, ethnicity, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of stuff that complicates feelings at work, right? How do you manage all of that? So use of emotion is this idea of trying to deal with planning how you want to feel. So ask yourself now, if after you hear this research point that I'm going to tell you about, how you would feel or how you do feel, because maybe you're experiencing it. So one of the articles, well, there's two places this was interesting. I had a chance to interview a woman named Deborah Tannen, who is a world-class author, folks. If you haven't read her books, I suggest you pick up, whatever, People at Work, or How Men and Women Are Different. The last one she wrote about her father. All her books are really interesting, about the argumentative culture in terms of what we're living today and how, she wrote the book maybe 20 some years ago, and it is what's happening to us today. And it was the beginnings of it, and she saw it. Anyway, Deborah Tannen talks about a double bind for women in an interview I do with her, and you can see it on YouTube. And in that interview, we talk about several of her books, but we talked about this idea of what happens to women in the workplace in some ways. And she was talking about the fact that often women are expected to demonstrate the qualities normally associated with males in order to be considered for leadership. They're asked to demonstrate that. And when they do, they're criticized for not being female, not being authentic. It's a double bind, and it's of concern. And here's how it plays out. This was another article. This was an article in Harvard Business Review about negotiations, and it showed that in terms of the research these authors had done, women were not strong negotiating for themselves, for raises, promotions, things like that. But they were strong negotiators for others, but not for themselves. Now, if you just heard that, you'd think, well, let's train them to be better. And I think that's a reasonable response. Let's teach them how to be better negotiators. Except for the fact that there are women who are really excellent negotiators, of course. And mostly what we hear in the research is that they are criticized when they negotiate and strongly advocate for themselves. Men aren't criticized in the same way as women are. That's the double bind. So, yes, you need to be a better negotiator for yourself, but when you do, we won't like it. Right? So, what to do? And, well, let me just tell you another thing I learned was it came from Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook notoriety, right? Sheryl Sandberg had written the book Lean In. If you hadn't read that, it was a really good read, I thought. It had a lot of really interesting and powerful insights that she shared. Anyway, when she was brought in, I guess, I'm not sure exactly when this happened, but her story was that at one point she was asking for either a promotion or a raise, or when she was being first hired. That wasn't clear, but what she did say was that I came in and I strongly advocated for myself. And the person told me, you're a pretty strong negotiator for yourself. And she said, well, you know what? Think about what you're hiring me for. You need me to be a really strong negotiator everywhere, especially with our vendors and sometimes with our customers. You need me really to be great at these skills. So wouldn't you want me to be good at negotiating for myself? I thought that was a brilliant story, but it sort of hits at the emotion roadmap. If somebody who is in power, for whatever reasons, are feeling like you shouldn't advocate for yourself strongly because of your gender, well, you can just be mad about that. But if you want to change it, give them a reason to understand why it's important for you to be good at this. And of course you're going to be advocating for yourself. Wouldn't he? Or even she. It's possible that's a woman who's seeing that. But just the idea of, find a way to bring it back to something important to them, that's meaningful to them, that makes them stop and think and feel differently about it. That's how you change it. So I think, I'd be mad if it happened, but I also would think, what can I do to make this right? This is one of the things I get credit for, at times anyway, is for being very practical. So I'm always looking for how do we use this to make this better. That's why when I mentioned the bipartisan infrastructure deal that just got passed in Congress, I said, this is the No Labels group worked on this, and I don't really care about parties. I did at one time, but I don't anymore. I care about the country. And I care about the people that are my neighbors and the people that are inside this state and the other states where we're all partners in living in the United States. I care about all of us. And so I want things to be best for all of us. And that means sometimes that you don't do what the party says. You do what you think your conscience says is the right thing and what would benefit most the people that you represent, while being fair to others. Challenging, actually. It's not as simple as it sounds. Because you understand in politics, people get a lot of funding from their parties. And if they're really loyal party members, they'll get more funding perhaps than somebody who doesn't always do what the party asks. So that's at least potentially out there as, how incentives work on the congressional side. So, again, I'd love to hear from you. We're halfway through the show. The number is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. And you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio. And thank all of you listeners for all of your support. This is in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We're broadcasting from the University of Connecticut. For me, this is my last time. I've said this before, though, but I really do believe in December when I'm back for the first 2 weeks on Wednesday at 12 noon, you will hear me in the new studio, the new beautiful studio. And I just want to publicly say thank you to everybody who's volunteered. It's, I live pretty far away from here, and I'm at an age where it's not great being inside with people really close up that you don't have much experience or know much about. And so I've been unable to take the ride and come down and do much in the way of volunteering in the studio with all the packing and transporting. I did take a day with the general manager and did help out on one day. I was able to move some things the time I was down here that he asked for some help, and I was able to do that. But it's, I really just want to thank everybody who has been doing it. I know even though you might be close that everybody's got busy lives, and I just want to say I know that I've been down to see the studio, and I was walking around, and it looks great. And so many of you have done so much to make it look beautiful. So public thank you to everybody that's been involved with that. And I encourage people to come down and see it. We're in the heart of Bridgeport now, or where we're going to be. And November 16th, some special things happening. You can look it up on the Facebook page if you like. But that's opening day. So that's after my 2 shows. And so I'll be back in December, and I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. Just to be, start off in the new studio. So I started to tell you a little bit about how we got started on this show. And one of the things that was happening was in my class when I was teaching at the University of Hartford, I was talking about the emotion roadmap. I was introducing, I talked about the 2 psychologists that I mentioned earlier, Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer, who discovered really the ability-based model of emotional intelligence, and then became interested in being able to measure the degree to which any of us have these abilities. And interestingly enough, by the way, they found out that, yes, we can measure how well we identify emotion, how well we use emotion, how well we understand emotion, and how well we manage emotion. And I want to say manage emotion has 2 key parts because they're different in my experience. One is how well we manage the emotions inside ourselves. And the second is how well we manage the emotions of others. Now, you may not think of yourself as managing others' emotions, but you constantly are. When you set boundaries for your children, when you make agreements, when you really almost anything, so much that we do every day, every moment has emotion in it. So we're always working and understanding to be better at dealing with emotions. And so that's what we started with. And when I was teaching about this in the classroom, I was actually asking people to bring in scenarios, if they were comfortable sharing them, that we could take the whole class and work through the emotion roadmap. Okay, the way that works is we ask people to tell us a little bit about your current situation. What's going on? And I say a little bit because sometimes people want to, give you the life story, and I don't want to know it started when I was born. I can't go there. So it's just a sort of a snapshot of what's going on. And then who's key to what's happening? Is this just something inside you, and we're just dealing with you? Or does this involve somebody else, a partner, spouse, child, boss, team member, somebody who works for you? I mean, who is this? A neighbor? It could be anybody, right? So who's involved, and what's going on with them? What are they feeling, and what would be ideal for them to feel? That's the use of emotion. And then how do you get there? If you're feeling anxious, you want to feel confident, how do you do that? And so the roadmap helps you explore how to do that. And then when you come up with strategies, scenarios that might work to change what you are feeling to something else, you consider all those different scenarios one by one, and you say, is this something I'm able to do? And is it something I'm willing to do? If it's able and willing, you've got something that could work. Now, it's just a plan. We know not all plans work, but you do have a plan. You have an emotional plan. Who does that? Nobody does emotionally planning, except since I introduced this idea, I think. But the idea of emotionally planning, right? How do you want to feel going into a tough conversation, during a performance review, telling someone some bad news? How do you want you and them to feel? How do you do that? How do you create what you want? So these are things that I teach, and I was teaching, and one of my students, Lou Pamalis, he is somebody who has been a friend since I met him those days when he was a student in my class. Lou had been a volunteer, I think at the time, for 30 plus years. I don't remember exactly how many, but 30 some years at this station called WPKN. And I don't get WPKN in Simsbury, so I hadn't really listened to the station, but he had me listen to it online. And it's a great station. I mean, it's if you don't know about the station and you just listen to me, I encourage you. If you like music, and there's a lot of interesting talk shows too. And so I encourage you to look at the calendar and think about what else you might like to listen to if you like listening to me. I love the people in front of me, Carl Frano, and we just had I Messiah. I don't know if you listen to his show. One of the things he left with, he's going to be back one more time. But I just want to repeat one of the things that he had a songwriter on and a singer, and he was talking about. He played a song, and the constant chorus line was clean hands and a pure heart. Clean hands and a pure heart. Now, if you think about that, at least for me, when I heard it, I thought, boy, that kind of sums everything up, doesn't it? Doesn't that sum up everything? Or at least almost everything? I'm trying to think, what doesn't that cover? Clean hands. I think the clean hands metaphor works for us. And pure heart, I don't know what else there is. Hard work, maybe, but that's clean hands. I mean, so anyway, I thought that was wonderful. And the interview was really good too. So it was nice. So anyway, listen to I Messiah or Carl Frano in the mornings before I come in. I love doing that when I'm driving in. And then Richard Epstein and Nick Jacobs, who have followed me in this for a lot of years, both of them have really, really good shows ranging from classical to opera to folk music. I mean, it's really it's eclectic, I guess, but they both talk a lot. They both have a tremendous amount of knowledge about music, and different, but really both shows interesting. So I just encourage you to listen to other things when you tune in. But I got here when Lou said to me, how would you like to be on the radio? And as people have talked about, their situations, and you handle them in just a few minutes and help them to really see alternatives that they couldn't see before you used the Emotion Roadmap, how about you doing that for our radio station as a volunteer, WPKN? And this is really interesting. I'd had a radio show, seems like forever ago, but back in the 1970s, actually. Family Education and Understanding. I was working as a school counselor for a while in the middle school or junior high at that time, and then also in the elementary school. So I was having a show called Family Education and Understanding, and I thought to myself when Lou asked, gee, I think that would be really fun to do and interesting, and I hope it would help people out. And he said, well, let's see what I can do. Because it's not easy to get on the radio. If anybody's ever tried, that's true. So I don't know if I would have ever known how to approach a radio station and say I've got an idea for a show. But Lou's been here for 38 years. He's been very active, has played some key roles here. And he's well known and well thought of. And he brought me to the attention of the general manager at the time, and he thought he was doing something special with noontime. He wanted a noontime talk hour. And he thought what I wanted to do was unique enough that nobody else was doing it anywhere, ever. And let's try it. And so I started off in December 1999. So that's, and that was because Lou brought me in. And I started once, I think I had a 3-hour show. And when you have a 3-hour, and we didn't have anybody call today. So sometimes I get, once in a while, somebody just calls and then a whole bunch of calls come in. Then some days I have a day where nobody's calling. Okay, well, what do I think people are going to be interested in listening to? And I usually come in with a few topics and some details around them. So anyway, the idea of trying to start the show was to come in and figure out what's the format. So I think I was on the weekends, which was kind of tough. I had to come down. I forget I don't even remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. But I had to come down for 3 hours, and I was there for 3 hours. And if you don't have people calling in, I'm good for an hour. I can talk for an hour. 3 hours that was a lot. So I tried to find ways to bring other people in and talk a little bit with other people. But the beauty of the show, frankly, and I hope you get to experience one of these, is a phone call when somebody's got something they want to work on, and we get to do that together. So let me give you that number to you again, in case you're thinking about it. I won't be back until the beginning of let's see, I'll be on, I guess, the next time will be in December. So in the new studio. Yeah, that's it. So it'll be a few weeks. So if you want to call, 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Well, this may go as a show where I've just talked for an hour or 55 minutes, and I hope what I'm talking about is of interest to you. It's interesting. I don't think I've ever really gotten a criticism for the show. Not that I know why anybody would call in and criticize it, but I have heard some lovely things about the show over the years. And so I do know that people are listening, but it is funny sometimes when you're sitting here and you don't get any callers and you think, oh, okay, is this just a conversation between myself and the camera and the audio here? But when you do call, what's fun is it's just always an unknown. It's sort of a surprise, not just for me, but for the listeners, right? Okay, I'll give you one more chance here. 203-336-9756. Okay. So when I got on the air, I was going for 3 hours at a time. Oh, got a call. Thanks. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air.
Hello.
Can you turn your radio down?
I can. I'm trying to save your show.
Thanks for the save.
Sometimes people just enjoy listening to you.
Well, I've heard that before. It's always nice to know that somebody still is out there listening.
So, I just thought I'd share that with you.
Thanks so much for that. I appreciate it. What was your first name again?
My name's Tom.
Tom, nice to talk with you, Tom. I appreciate you making the call. Are you driving?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Don't tell anybody.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I hope that wherever you're going, you're enjoying the drive. I don't know it's kind of a nice day out, so at least you got that.
Yeah, well, I got good radio, so I'm doing well.
That's so nice to hear that. Thank you.
Hey, we'll catch you later, buddy.
Thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it, Tom. Have a good day.
Got it.
Bye-bye. That was nice. Okay. Anybody else want to save the show? You can just call in at 203-336-9756. And I don't feel like you're saving the show. I actually, when I've got some things to share that I think people benefit from and enjoy listening to, I think it's worth, being on the air. I'd said I was going to talk about women in leadership. I've covered a couple things with you. I've got another call. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
You're talking to Joe?
Joe, thanks for the call. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to try to make this simple if I can.
Sure.
It's concerning my job. I work at a place for the last 13 years. It's a really good job. and it's difficult with the political environment that we live in right now. Either if I'm a left wing or a right wing, I'm not going in that saying what I am exactly.
Sure.
But it's very difficult to work right now, the way people are all teamed up on their team, kind of what I'm saying, if you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, I definitely understand what you're saying, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's challenging.
So my current problem is when Mr. Trump was president, all the people that I work with, I would say the majority of them, about 90%, were silent about everything that was going on during his administration. And now that Mr. Biden is president, it's like every day, now it's not fake news and now whatnot. But it's just put that beside, because that's just the way people are going to be. They're going to be in their camp or whatever. But how do I emotionally go in there? It's difficult to work under these conditions, because everybody knows like kind of my position by now. And so how do I handle it emotionally coming into work every day? Because I don't want to quit the job. It's a really great job, but
so let me give you a couple of ideas that I think one requires a little bit of more. Well, I mean, they both take some effort on your part, but they potentially can be helpful to you. So the first thing is understanding, what's driving this for you. What makes you want to make the call, Joe? In other words, you're feeling concerned about this. You don't want to lose your job, but there's a tremendous amount of pressure all the time with people kind of being on one side or the other and maybe wanting to pull you into their camp, and you're the enemy if you're not with them. So, I mean, there's a lot of that tension everywhere as far as I can see. And I think some people have just decided, you know what, we don't talk politics in our workplace. We just don't do it anymore. Somebody wants to do it outside at the bar with somebody, that's up to them. But in the workplace, we're just not doing it because it's too distracting and dysfunctional. And so some people have just done that. But you don't necessarily control your workplace. It's going to happen to other places anyway. So it's more about, I think, how do you want to feel when it comes up? I mean, have you thought that through yet? How do you? I mean, it's going to keep coming up. But instead of feeling the way you do, how would you want to feel?
Well, when it comes up, I usually ignore it. Like I would say 99% of the time I ignore it. And then sometimes, like one occasion happened recently where somebody was just talking so much nonsense about the COVID that I kind of lost it. And then it was in a meeting, and then like everybody kind of teamed up against me. And it was, I felt I should have just kept quiet. When it was over, I said, you know what? I'm not going to change anybody's mind. I wasn't trying to change anybody's mind. I was just trying to say that the information you're getting is not true, and it's just like, I don't know. So I am quiet. 99% of the time I'm quiet. But, people looking at their phones constantly, and then they're commenting constantly about, oh, look at this, look at that. I mean, it just never ends,
So here's I think some specific steps. You want to feel like calm in the midst of this storm. I think if I could specify it, maybe you didn't really say it, but I mean, if I'm in your shoes, what I'm hoping to feel is like, this is just noise. I feel calm when I hear it. It's not setting me off anymore.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I would like to do. And
so that makes sense? Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, I mean that's right. I try to do that. Yeah, and I guess that's just the way I'm going to have to stay and live in this place. I guess, but
well, let me get to the next part of it with you then, Joe, okay, because I think this is sort of like a pretty good example of how this works when it's working. So if you look at what you just said, you want to get to a calmness. So that means that when that happens, it's kind of like a jackhammer going off outside your hotel room. It's like a pain in the ass, but it's going to be there for a little while and then it's gone. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's kind of like one of those things that you just, hey, it's there. It's an annoyance. I'm not going to change it. I can't go out there and tell the guy not to do that.
Right.
Or the woman, whoever's doing it.
Yes.
So at that point, you want to be able to say, this isn't about them. This is about me.
Right.
And this is about how I'm reacting to this. And I control that. They don't control me. And anytime you let them control you, you get mad at yourself.
Right. You're right. Yeah.
You just say, what the heck? Why am I letting those guys bother me again? That's just what they do. Somehow they're passionate about that. It's a way for them just to blow off some steam. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, you're right. And I would agree with you. Yep.
So I mean, if you can, so that's sort of the strategy. I'm kind of want to make sure I get to you, so you understand what would be helpful. But I think that's one thing. So that's sort of like, what do you control yourself, and then Joe, just how it's going to actually work for you in real time is you want to think the next time it happens, what do you want to feel, and what do you want to be saying to yourself? In other words, what can you plan a script actually for what you want to say to yourself the next time you know it's coming? It might come in 30 minutes from now. It might come tomorrow. You know, it's going to come. What do you want to be saying that's different and more helpful to get you to that calm place? And I'm not going to say figure that out this second, but you need to figure that out.
Right. I get you. I appreciate the help. Yeah. I want to just make one other point is, you know, I work with like 13 guys. We're pretty close, and I like these guys, you know, and it's like my strategy almost is now I kind of like stay away from them. And I want to talk about other stuff, you know, and it's just like, it's like always politics gets involved in everything nowadays, and it's difficult.
All right. I got something for you for that too. I mean, this will take a little work on your part, but it'll give you some skills you don't have right now, and that most people don't have. There's a group called Braver Angels. Just type in Braver Angels into Google or Yahoo, whatever search you use.
Okay.
And Braver Angels does workshops about how to have people who are lean red very strongly or moderately, whatever, but they're red, talk to blue, and that's how they define things. You know, it's the people on the left and the right, and you know, everybody's. You know, what you're experiencing, Joe, is I can't tell you how many other people are feeling exactly those same kinds of feelings right now. And so, Braver Angel is growing like crazy, and it's free. You go to these things for free, but you have to go online, and you got to be part of groups and listen to what they're saying, and then understand how it's making you feel.
Right. Okay.
It's really powerful stuff, and that'll help you with this other part. And actually, I hope everybody who's listening, again, that's what's so nice when somebody calls, because I'm able to say, you, Joe, you should look into this. But I think everybody should look into this if they have those same concerns. And I think probably 70-80% of the people listening today probably have those concerns.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it, and I do listen to your program when it's on.
Great.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for the call, Joe. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So that's how the emotion roadmap works, and it's hopefully a good example of what you're saying. You know, it's kind of like, hey, here's something I'm stuck with, trying to think it through. Well, how about emotional planning? How about thinking about what you are feeling as you think about what you just told me about? So the workplace dynamic is toxic around the politics, and that's so true in so many places, right? Now, if that's true, how do you deal with it? Well, again, part of this is what can you say to yourself that's different? Oh, by the way, let me just, and Joe, if you're still listening, for everybody, really, this is some great advice I got one time. I was listening to another speaker, and I'll tell you who it was in a second, but it was a man, and he said that, you know, one of the things that's happening anytime you're in a conversation that gets a bit heated, and it is controversial, and there is some conflict, and you want to say something, you want to ask yourself these three things. First, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said? Okay. Second, does this need to be said by me? And third, does this need to be said by me now? I think that's great advice, and has saved me in a number of situations, myself, from speaking up when I know that there's no payback. You know, I disagree with what I just heard. I think I have some evidence to support a different point of view. But is that going to change anything here? Or is it possible it just might escalate? And I think when it might escalate and it's not worth it, I just don't do it anymore. But does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said by me now? Those wonderful words of wisdom come from Craig Ferguson, who is a comedian, who said that it took him 3 marriages to learn to do that. Anyway, so don't forget that. That's a really helpful tool, I think. You know, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said by me now? And if you say no to any of those, right? That's it. All right, I'm coming to the close of my show. It was fun being with you today. I hope that you enjoyed the show. And thanks for the callers. I really appreciate that. You've been listening to Chuck Wolf. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And it's WPKM 89.5 FM, Listener Supported Radio. And this is my last time broadcasting from the University of Bridgeport. Bye-bye, everybody.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.